Hello, and welcome back to the Argyle SMB Finance Leadership Forum. My name is Brittany Sullivan with Argyle, and it's great to have everyone joining us today. A couple of notes before I turn things over to our panel moderator. First, a quick reminder to stop by our sponsors' virtual booths at any time during today's event and for the following week. Our partners are committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. At any time during today's event, you can visit their virtual booths from the main agenda page, which include complimentary materials, information, and meet and greet opportunities. For those seeking CPE credit today, you must answer at least 3 polling questions and remain on the session for its duration. Polls can be found under the Polls tab on the right-hand side of your console next to Chat. Afterwards, if you are eligible to receive credit, you will receive an email with a link to your certificates. If you have any questions on credits, please email cpe@argyleforum.com. To ask questions throughout the session, simply type into the Q&A chat, and we will address your questions at the end of the session. Now, without further delay, I would love to introduce our moderator, Keith Neal, Executive Vice President and Chief Financial Officer at Advocates. We're excited to have Keith and our panelists with us for a panel titled Digital Transformation for SMB Finance Success. Welcome, Keith, and over to you.
So we'll start with brief introductions. Again, my name is Keith Neal. I'm the CFO at Advocates, one of the largest providers of mental health, autism, and other health and human service programs in Massachusetts. With me, we have a very accomplished group of panelists that will be ready to jump in on the topics. First, I'll ask them each to give a brief introduction. Why don't we start with Michael?
Good morning, and thanks, Keith. My name is Michael Mance. I am the main financial officer at Dialysis Care Center, located in the Chicagoland area. We are a national dialysis clinic-based operation. I have about 35 years of experience, cut my teeth originally in public accounting and then various industry leadership roles with some consulting, which led me to here. But glad to be aboard here. It's a great topic to talk about this morning.
Great. Thank you, Michael, for being on the panel. Next, we'll go to Alonzo.
Thank you, Keith. I appreciate it. My name is Alonso Ramos. I've been a CFO for during the last 8 years, mostly in the manufacturing space. The last 2 years being with the Intech Group. I have specialized on becoming a strategic CFO, supporting the CEO, the shareholder, the board of directors, and obviously a commercial and operations team. Always looking forward to grow sustainable at the bottom line. And I'm thrilled to participate in this conference, especially in the subject of digital transformation. Is very close to me, and hopefully I will be able to share some of my experiences on this. Thank you so much. Back to you, Keith.
Great. Thank you very much. And then at the panel, we have Swetha. Why don't you go ahead?
Thanks, Keith, and really excited to be here. My name is Shweta Pai. I'm the CFO for a company called VCM Products. We provide consumer goods. We're a small consumer goods company that looks into pest control, pest repellent, all natural pest repellent products. Our biggest brand is the Grandpa Gus brand, which is found in most retail stores. And we are private equity owned, and I've been here for about a year. Prior to this, I was CFO for startups. And before that, I worked in finance across a lot of large companies across a lot of different industries, such as pharma, hospital, healthcare, as well as investment banking and M&A. So I specialize in really the strategic decision making, and as well as financial process optimization. And I've worked in a lot of M&A and private equity fields. So really excited to talk more about digital transformation and how that can really change our field here.
Thank you very much. Thanks to the panel for that introduction. It's clear we got a nice range of experience on the panel today, so I'm hoping everyone will find this very informative. So why don't we kick this off by talking about some of the challenges around digital transformation initiatives. I think digital transformation, in my experience, means so many things to so many people. Talking about some of the challenges for getting some of these programs off the ground, I think would be a good place to start. So why don't we start with Alonzo? Maybe you can give us some insight into your background and experience around addressing and identifying some of the challenges in this space.
Thank you, Keith. It's very interesting questions. What are the challenges in implementing digital transformation? When I think about it, I can think of three areas actually of that are important for me. The first one, I would say, it needs to make sense with your business needs. It is important to see what you're trying to accomplish. Is this a nice to have, or is this something that actually is going to enhance the team? It's going to make it more efficient. It's going to be of obvious benefit for the organization. It has happened to me a couple of times when I implemented ERPs, in which I've done an evaluation, and although the perspective of what the system can do are very interesting, once it is discussed with the operations teams or our teams, they don't see an actual benefit of doing the implementation. So it's very important to make sure that it's something that it really fits your business and is really needed for the organization. The second challenge I see is in terms of the justification, financial justification. Some of these projects are expensive, some others are not that expensive, but it's important to determine what is the ROI. In many cases, and it happens to me with a couple of companies that approach me, when they did the package, they presented the package to me. They presented that the elimination of positions were going to pay for the project itself, which is a consideration, of course. Gotta be careful with that, especially I've been in the small business in the last few years. And when you have, like, for example, you're doing an implementation, accounts payable, account receivable, you say that you have 3, 4, 5 people, then you eliminate one position, another one goes on vacation, you lose one person, you ended up with 1 or 2 in the office. So it could become very tight. And many of these projects don't necessarily replace 100% of the people. So it is important to consider what is the real justification for the project. Sometimes I try to start with that's a real financial implication. For example, an AR system. There are many systems that help you in collection, to control the collection, to the invoice and all these things. Can this actually improve your collection, your reduce your days? How you translate that in the time value of money is something that you can justify, and maybe leave like a potential termination, something like that, as an increase even to the return of investment. But usually try to find a real financial reason based on the business to do the implementation. And the third one is the people as well. Many times, there's resistance of change, and the way that I go around to that is I made the people involved in the project from the beginning. They need to own it. They need to feel part of it in order to commit to it, and help me to make it sure that it's successful. I just put it there, and they have the fear that this is the whole intention is to eliminate my job. They might even sabotage the project or something like that. So that's why it's important to be honest with people. If that's the case, you might even say it directly, or if it's just by attrition, you can probably manage it that way. But regardless of your approach, it's very important to make sure that you have the commitment of the people. So in summary, I would say those are the three challenges I've seen, the major ones at least. Make sure that it fits with the business, make sure that you can justify financially the investment, many times a lot of money, and make sure that the people are committed with the project. I hope that helps. Back to you, Keith.
Those are some really great points. I think the one that's for me, and they all do, but certainly having a strong understanding of the business case and the ROI, I think are particularly, important as these projects move along.
Yeah, I would like to add one other thing to that, if you don't mind, is one of the things that I found, especially coming from a large company to a much smaller company, has been that there are a lot of data integration issues. There's a lot of legacy and a lot of more manual work that gets done in a smaller company. So to actually do a transformation, you end up having a lot more of kind of cleanup work that needs to be done beforehand in order to even prep and get ready for a new ERP or whatever other cloud-based system that you have, because there people get used to, and Alonzo, you referred to this, people get kind of used to the way that they're doing things, and a lot of times because lack of budget, it's been there's just no money, or people are just used to doing it a certain way. There's just a lot more legacy systems, a lot more manual systems that now you have to really churn and clean up before you even get going on this path. So that's another one big challenge that I know that we've faced in multiple companies. And it seems to be amplified the smaller it gets.
Thank you for that additional input. That's all brilliant. Thinking about what we just talked about here, thinking about like how do we go from, we're looking at challenges, we know what the challenges are. How do we go about, maybe Michael, I'll pose this question to you. How do you go about determining the best tools and technologies, that you want to look at for these digital, these digital transformations, kind of incorporating, everything that Alonzo and Swetha just said around ROI and business case and transparency and data governance?
Yeah, so it's a good question to piggyback on the initial one. It's just having a good comprehensive RFP process. But it's not just about the demos. It's kind of about a brand reputation of the product that you're going to go to. But I have had success really reaching out to my network, what has worked best for them, whether you're talking various ERP accounting softwares or AP tools, or really what it's talking about now is even AI functionality to enhance all the processes. Reaching out to your network, you can learn, what worked for them, what didn't work, what lessons were learned. But I think you really need to also keep in mind the future growth of your company. You don't want to outgrow it in the future, and waste all this time and effort that you put in and invested in, the people, obviously in the costs related to it. From a ROI perspective, if you break it down, not just from a dollar amount, but the people, the process, and technology. We talked a little bit about the people, but, letting them do their jobs more efficient, more effective. Maybe it promotes them to do other functions to help them from a career perspective. Also, the normal course return on investment, what the cost is versus what your future cost would be of your new system. But also, I think it creates opportunities, like I was saying, for your staff, which I believe enhances employee retention. I think that also then having a good state of our current technology system, also attracts new talent as you're looking out there. I think that's very appealing. I just believe, you got to look at it beyond kind of the cost, but, the people, the process, and the technology in your current team, like Alonzo was, speaking to just earlier.
Great, thank you. Yeah, again, a lot of very salient points certainly tying into we've talked about it in the first question. And I like that you brought up the people aspect and the staff opportunity. I think that's sometimes, certainly in the finance function, we're always running so fast, it can be hard to kind of keep that front of mind, right? That these changes are going to impact your staff, and they're not always for the negative, right? It's moving into new technologies and better GLs and ERPs and planning systems does give people the opportunity to grow and transform their skills. So it's not always about cost reduction. So I'm really really glad you brought that up as a point today. So again, maybe going along this maybe expanding slightly on that theme, if we want to think about how during these initiatives, we build in opportunities to improve our real-time insights and into what's going on and better impact strategic decision making for the teams and for the company. Swetha, maybe I'll bring it over to you now. How does digital transformation, kind of as we move along these projects, kind of better our ability to take finance and make it a more proactive, data-driven organization?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is something that I've worked in this field for about more than 20 years, and this is something that has always been near and dear to my heart, as in the sense that in finance, we want to achieve two major goals when we actually go through any kind of digital transformation. First is we want it to enable informed decision making, and secondly, we want it to help us, to your point, Keith, become much more proactive, and really predict and enhance our predictability so that we can be better prepared financially to support our organization, whether it's scaling up or accounting for real risks that exist within the business. Some of the big kind of real-time insights and how it has really transformed and really helped us in the kind of the strategic side of things has been really around things like, so I'm in a company that's owned by a private equity firm, so cash flow is paramount for us. So cash flow, as well as maintaining our inventory, AR, AP, working capital, basically. These are the two big engines that I'm constantly on a daily basis managing. And this is where digital transformation and getting real-time insights really, really helps. When we get a big order from a larger retailer, how are we preparing for it? Do we know that it's coming? How do we take on the site? So we sell consumer goods. So our goods come from, some of them come from overseas or manufacturers. Once they come into the manufacturers, they go into a warehouse. And then from there, it goes to a distributor like Home Depot, Menards, and then it goes to the consumer. So we have to churn our data that we're getting from Home Depot, Menards, et cetera, the point of sale, how much are they churning, and then turn that into how do we prepare and how much do we need in our warehouse, how much does our distributor need, and how much do we need to get from our manufacturer. These are all different kind of points that we need to manage along that kind of inventory and product life cycle, sales life cycle. This is where real-time insights becomes really key for us to understand, okay, what is actually in transit, what's actually getting shipped. And we look at it daily. And then it turns into also cash management is, we do, and as I'm sure many of us do, weekly 13-week cash flow forecasts. Well, for that, I need real-time data. I need to know exactly what's in my bank, exactly which payments are coming in, which payments are going out. I have to have, and which is kind of expected to come in. There's so many tools nowadays that can actually help me predict what my costs will be looking out that 13 weeks so that I can be a lot better prepared. My capital is better invested. And then on top of that, I can make sure that things like inventory management or orders that I'm putting in, terms with my vendors. These are all being negotiated. These are all things that I can get now. Nowadays, there's so many tools out there that can actually help me understand all of these costs and all of the drivers. So for me, it's been just strategically managing all of these items, but also looking ahead and looking at, okay, if we're selling, in our retailer, if that is growing 100x, or whatever, 10x, than where we were last year, what does that mean for me for the remainder of the year, as well as what does it mean for me for next year, and how do I prepare for that? These are all the real-time insights that get churned into actual plan and strategic budget forecasts, all of those rolling monthly forecasts, rolling cash flows. Technology can enable us to do that, and that's where I find the most help and the most impact for all of these decision making.
Thank you. Yeah, very, very, very comprehensive answer to that question, Swetha. Thank you.
Can I comment a little bit on that one, because that was great input by Sweta, and I feel you when she was saying about the cash is king, for
Yeah,
especially for many of us, for going from the large to a small environment.
right.
Yeah, as just as she said, I mean, something that you need to track on a weekly and sometimes daily basis. I
Right.
do as well, and digital transformation can help you on that. And talking a little bit on the manufacturing environment, which is what I've been in the last few years. Things like, for example, we have developed in one of our plants in-house systems, which we couldn't find one that could fit our needs, that calculates all the, for example, waste, efficiency of machines, capacity of machines. So when you have like opportunities from customers to maybe increase production or take over production from other competitors that are failing or things like that, you need to have, is practically mandatory to have real time information in your hands, so you can make a decision and have a quick answer to the customer, and that will impact your business, could impact your business significantly. And the answer is to have develop a KPI system that feeds you the information in real time. So, in that sense, the digital transformation can really be a game changer for us. Thanks.
Great. Thank you for that additional insight, Alonzo. Very, very helpful. Uh, so again, building on Alonzo, what you just said, and Swetha, what you just said, there's so much that goes into this in terms of data and analytics and processes and procedures. Maybe we can shift for a little, and now we'll go back to Alonzo for this question. So as we start to look at these new technologies, how do we, I think we've all heard that, great is the enemy of good, right? So how do we, as we start to move forward with these initiatives, there are really two things. How do we put things in place to make sure that we're not overcomplicating this new technology and these new programs? As Michael said, we do want to plan for future growth, but we probably need to think about how that gets staged. So how do we make sure we're not kind of overreaching on some of these initiatives and overcomplicating a program? And how do we also make sure that our teams don't get overwhelmed by the sheer volume of what's going on, right? Everyone's got their day job, and kind of in many of our shops, those are the same people that are very involved with these big implementations. So maybe it's a little two-part question for you, Alonzo, if you could weigh
Yeah.
in, and others as well. But let's start with Alonzo.
Thank you, Keith. Quite interesting. It happened to me a few years ago, back in the day, in which I insisted on implementing an AP system that reads automatically the invoices and classify into different buckets, and marries that with our POs and all. This is a beautiful thing. And then after spending a year with the team to implement it successfully, I asked my treasury manager, so, well, do you think that it was worth it? I mean, does it actually help? She said, no, actually, it doesn't help at all. I mean, we were okay with the server and just the digital copies in the server, and just with that we can do the same work. I mean, we really didn't need the system. So it is in especially in the small business environment, it is important to have that understanding because you know how many people the people can get quite busy, and as mentioned, I mean, you have one on vacation and it starts becoming tricky. So this is the reason things need to make sense. If and it happens to me, I take a demo from the provider and everything looks great, and even you can ask for testimonials or other companies they have served, and they'll probably cherry pick a couple and give it to you that are interested on closing the business, and that's great. But I personally, before implementing anything, I there are two things I do. Number one, I go to the operations teams, to the people that are really involved. For example, in an ERP, and it happened, many of the CFOs actually have IT reporting to the position, and they sometimes make decisions without consulting everybody else. I really advise to make sure you talk to your people that are really going to be in the day-to-day operation. And if it's, for example, in manufacturing, an ERP will impact the operations in manufacturing. Make sure that they buy into the project. They might find it useful, they might not find it useful. And so that's internally, that's very important to analyze. The other thing is externally. In our company, well, we belong to the plastic industry. It's a very large industry, even in the Illinois area. Um, we belong to a smaller group. It's only 12 of us that we do exactly the same. It's kind of the niche of the custom molding, injection molding for parts. So we do exactly the same. So we sit together every 3 months. We actually met last week and share these experiences. And that's the opportunity also to ask. So, for example, if one of us is implementing a project or wants to implement a project, as the rest of the teams is like, do you have experience with this? Have you implemented this? What's your experience? Gathering real life experience from others could be very beneficial, especially if it's unbiased. Sometimes I do it with a vendor or a sister company, something like that. They also can provide information, maybe a customer, I don't know. But it's good to ask out there what is their experience. So it's never gonna be perfect because what if it's one company might not fit yours, but it's this gathering that knowledge, that experience from other companies that have been doing the same, it will give you a better idea of this is really gonna be beneficial for the team, or it's just gonna be overwhelming, just put more work in their hands without seeing a real benefit. So that's been my experience. Go internally, make sure you consult internally, and go externally and try to find some similar experiences that you can get some insights from. Thank you. Back to you, Keith.
Thanks for all that. Yeah, all that makes really good sense, Alonzo. I think in my experience, the many projects I've been involved in over my career, having a defined change management process can also be pretty helpful. I know I've had examples, as I'm sure the panel and people in the audience have as well, where everyone's got the best of intentions, but if you don't have that necessary bureaucracy on some of these projects, sometimes you go, and then all of a sudden it's like you're over budget and you're way off your deliverables, right? So I think having some sort of change management process. But Alonzo, I think some of the themes you've hit on are key to that. Certainly, involving the people that are directly involved in the new process is certainly very, very key as well. Okay, so thinking. So thinking about everything we've already talked about already, Swetho, come back to you, and then this lines up with the last question you took as well. So once we get these tools, defined and in place, how do we use these tools and technologies to really amplify the impact that the finance teams can have on the business and be more forward looking rather than just historians of what's occurred in the past?
Yeah, absolutely. And I talked about it a little bit already, so I'll keep it brief because I do want to get to Michael sharing his real life experiences. So I'll just keep it brief on the as far as using technology to look forward, the key is, first of all, we have to think about collaboration across different functions. That's always going to be one of the big cornerstones of, because a lot of the historical data tends to be very focused on, whatever's coming in already. And but going forward, when we're looking forward, working with other functions, especially operations, sales, etc., these are way more important as we're looking forward. So I would say that's number one, is a holistic digital transformation that applies for not just finance, but if it can have an impact and change operations processes as well, we have to include that. That is how we get into that rolling forecast, into the scenario-based or driver-based budgets. These are all possible once you have the digital form transformation done, but we can't do it without the collaborative kind of effort. So that's really all I wanted to add. Let me just, I know we're running out of time, so I'll just end there and turn it over to back to you, Keith.
Yeah, thanks. So all very salient details and commentary. I wish maybe we could probably just do a whole session just on what you're on what you're talking
Exactly.
about.
Right.
And then certainly getting I think it can be easy to sometimes overlook the different touch points that even extend outside the finance teams, and that those can be very important, and make sure those stakeholders are involved, not just in development, but data validation and process and input. So there is certainly a wider set of stakeholders to that. So we've got a couple more minutes before we'll break for Q&A. So I think we could probably fit one more topic in before addressing some of the questions that have started coming in. So we'll go back to Michael. And so, we've talked about some of the incremental stuff with these projects, but maybe can you share any real world examples you've had, in this space, and what you might have learned along the way of implementing some of these projects?
Yeah, so we just went through an ERP implementation and went live this year. You gotta have like realistic goals, the timing, because everybody's got to kind of do their day job as well. But what was mentioned here is change management, I think, is paramount, which we brought up here. But it's also, like Alonso said, is getting everybody involved. It's not just about the accounting and finance team, because it affects other areas, throughout the entire organization. And that's where you need to be transparent. And what are their needs? How are their jobs going to be more efficient and effective utilizing the technology after the go live? But so I think you need to consider those right people in the right job. I think it provides other opportunities for people to share what they believe improving the process, but getting everybody involved in their individual tasks. We also mentioned, I think Alonso mentioned a couple of times, if someone's out, you have change on the team, but it's cross training as well. Just ensuring that everybody's trained, not just on their job, but it provides them opportunity to kind of get out of their box, so to speak, and, get other experiences with the new technology that will make their current and potentially future task more efficient and more effective. And then also, as you go through the process, additional functionality down the road. So we did do the ERP implementation, but we knew we were going to do an FP&A module as well. In that, getting a lot of the blocking and tackling done on the ERP system implementation made the FP&A implementation really smooth and a lot easier. So I think you need to consider those, and any other functionality within or outside the accounting and finance, and then considering, a lot of these AI tools that is, the talk nowadays. But, I think, you got to look at it, holistically. And, it went pretty well for us, but it was very educational, realistic deadlines. You also got to think when you're going to finish, if you're, if you have quarterly or more importantly, year-end close processes, you probably want to avoid those, especially from a year-end perspective.
Great, thank you. Yeah, very, very, very good commentary on implementing those projects in the real world. Sometimes it can be easy to talk about them in the academic sense. Actual implementation is often where the challenges is. So I guess before we go over to the Q&A, I'll just open it up and see if our panelists want to, if there's any other quick thoughts you have on this topic, and then we can jump into the Q&A. We've had several questions come in. We'll try and answer as many as possible, but I'll stop and see if the panelists have anything else they want to mention before we go to Q&A.
Nope, nothing from my end. I think the questions seem really interesting. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they're solid questions, and like you had mentioned, I think we could do an entire session on this. So many spokes on the wheel that you need to consider.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. So with that, we'll jump into the questions. There are a lot now that have come in, so I'm not sure we'll get to them all, but we'll try and get to as many as we can. So I'll start. I'll kick it off and then open it up for the panelists to weigh in. So the first question we'll talk about has to do around competencies for the finance team. So someone asked, based on these trends and the importance of digital transformation in finance, what are the most critical competencies to develop for the finance team? So I'll kick that off, give my panelists a couple seconds to think about it, and then they can jump in and we can move on. But I think from my experience, there's a couple skills that have been helpful on these projects. One is really developing people's expertise really outside the sphere of the pure finance area. As we go through these projects, the folks that are involved need to have an understanding of what's happening at an operational level with the company. They need to know how things happening in like product marketing impact things that are happening in engineering, and how does that impact things in the finance worlds around budget allocations, capital expenditures, cash management, things like that. So there's a broader cross-functional awareness kind of at the high corporate level. Then even within the finance team, like I found as we roll these out, my revenue cycle team needs to be better connected with my general accounting team. That needs to be better, connected to the FP&A team, because all these things really play into each other. And if you're stuck in those siloed views, you can really lose the benefit of what you're trying to achieve. So with that, I'll open it up to see if the panelists have anything else to say on this question.
No, I think that's key. I would also add technology fluency and the ability to work a lot with data, such as data cleanup, maintaining a good data hygiene process. These are all good skills to have. And I think when I say the, technological fluency, I would also, what I'm talking about is like just, you don't have to know the system necessarily, but you have to know how things like databases in general work, how the BI tools in general work. You don't necessarily need to know Power BI or whatever, but you would need to know in general the concept. So those are also big competencies that I found is necessary when we engage our team to take on these transformations.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think people that are open to change, that can strategically think, and then they're open to getting kind of out of their accounting and finance hat, and they're going to be an administrator, in the system. So I've had successes, with that on our current implementation, and I think it's provided more opportunities for the team, current and future state.
Mhm. Good point. I think Michael mentioned the importance of cross training. That's something that we need to keep in mind every time we bring new people to organization, or we develop the current ones, and make sure that they're open and willing to learn more. Uh, Always when you hire, you look for a good combination of soft and some hard skills, but soft skills, people with the right attitude, with willingness or eager to learn more. And when these opportunities come, or practically, I try to push to do it constantly, to have the people cross training between each other, learning. And sometimes I actually change a little bit the positions as well, so they feel that job enrichment that we're developing, and they're learning new things and constantly challenging themselves. Obviously, you need the right personnel that are actually happy and eager and willing to take these type of initiatives. But if you do, it can work very well. Then they can learn from each other and become a better team as well, and they will enjoy the knowledge, the extra knowledge, and the understanding that the broader understanding they have of the business. Thank you.
Thanks for that input. I think very useful information. So the next question from the Q&A we'll jump to is around more of the kind of the process maybe leading up to the project. So a question came in around the change management process, around what's your process around defining needs or requirements. So again, I'll start and open it up. I think this is really critical to have the intended impact that you want to have. You need to develop a pretty solid set of business requirements and identify all the relevant stakeholders. And sometimes that's not easy. There's often stakeholders that are maybe more on the edges of the processes you're talking about that might not be obvious, that could really be impacted by any of the changes you're doing. So, pulling together, the subject matter experts, pulling together the different organizations to understand what are the business requirements, what are the skills you're going to need, like what sort of staffing you might need for this, keeping in mind that in a lot of organizations, the people doing the project are also the people doing the day job as well. So I'll stop in a second, but I think pulling together that cross-functional team to really kind of walk through, and oftentimes it includes getting in a conference room with post-it notes and doing process mapping to make sure everyone agrees and understands what that process is that you're trying to change. So I'll throw it over to the panelists for some input.
Yes, and I would like to take that one because it's using an example that Sweta brought previously, a cash flow projection, something as simple as that. You gotta have the type of information, and sometimes you need the change management should be aligned of the objectives of the company. So what are we pursuing? Maybe we're pursuing better collections so we can pay our vendors faster, and reduce maybe our line of credit utilization, things like that, reduce interest expenses. All those are the things that we're dealing with in this especially in a smaller business environment, and that needs to be, the change management should be aligned to that. It could be good. For example, you can say, well, come and implement Tableau. Tableau is a beautiful tool, and I've used it. It's a beautiful tool, but it is not very strong on projection. So it might be a nice to have, but it's not aligning. The change management is not aligning with my business needs. But maybe there's another tool that can help me to improve on my cash flow, and that's the one that I want to pursue. So that's why it's very important to align the change management and the process with the business needs of the organization. We need to keep that in mind, and the people will you get the buy-in by the group, uh, based on how they see that connection right away. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thanks. So we're almost out of time, but I think we can fit in maybe one more quick question. The last question we'll wrap up on is, what are the best practices for integrating real-time data analytics into existing finance processes? And I guess I'll open that up for the panelists to weigh in.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the one I mentioned, but I think you need to have a steady state, especially with your general ledger and your data, as well as your historical data.
Yep.
If you don't, it's not going to mean much of anything. So that has worked well for us, where we got the ERP at a steady state and then launched the FP&A module from an analytical perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I would say some of the best practices I've seen across a lot of these, especially in the smaller companies, is we make sure scalable tools are used, or we're using things that can scale up or down as necessary. I would also say you want to start small, right? I would go with something really small but high impact, potentially, like cash flow management, cash flow monitoring. These are things that are easy to implement and get going and get people kind of used to it. And then we can go across to other areas. I'd also focus on, we talked about this in the past, and Michael, you also mentioned this, we have to look at current data and making sure that that is good, but also an easy way to get into real-time data analytics and those kind of transformation is to look at automating the data flow. So you're not looking at anything downstream, but upstream, just automating that data flow so it flows from one system to another seamlessly. That can be a huge win right there. And again, get people comfortable with the tool. So those are the three areas that I would say would be my best practice.
Okay. Great. No, thank you very much. I think that was very insightful. I wish we could get to more questions, but we are running up against the deadline here. So thank you to everyone in the audience. Michael, Alonso, Swetha, thank you for being on this panel. I know I learned a lot. I had several notes that I'm going to leave this session with and go talk to my team about. So with that, I will turn it back over to our hosts for for this session.
Thank you all so much for such an insightful panel. I also want to thank everyone else for joining us today. This session, along with all of today's content, will be made available on demand following the event. Our next session will begin shortly, so please click on the join button that will appear on your screen to be redirected to the next session. And we look forward to seeing you there.